All right, hello and welcome to this week's edition of SouthCoast End Zone. I'm Tim Weisberg.
I'm Laurie Loss.
And we are here to talk with you about all the area high school football action. We apologize if the video is a little choppy. We're dealing with a storm here while we're trying to put this together, but nothing will stop us.
No, nothing will stop us.
And we are ready to talk with you about all the high school football action in the area, especially last week when, I'm sorry to say, my Vikings did not have enough to take down Dighton Rehoboth.
Yeah, Dighton Rehoboth came out strong in that game, and really Wareham didn't play its game. You know, the Vikings struggled on offense, and Wareham the DR just took advantage, had some nice drives, and I mean, it was a close game really until, the second half. Wareham was within striking distance, and the Vikings just couldn't get much going. They had a couple turnovers, and, just the offense kind of struggled at times. So, huge win for Dighton Rehoboth. The Falcons are now, at the top of the conference all by themselves. There's 2 games left, for both teams. They're both in the South Coast Conference. Let's see. Dighton Rehoboth hosts Pontiac this Friday, and then on Thanksgiving hosts Seekonk. Mm-hmm. So I know Wareham players and fans are going to be rooting for the Lakers this week.
Right.
Because if the Lakers can knock off Dighton Rehoboth, then Wareham can win out, then they finish as co-champs. Mm-hmm. Although Dighton Rehoboth would still make the playoffs because they have the tiebreaker winning the head-to-head.
Well, or they could lose to Seekonk too.
Seekonk, I think, has one win this year, none in the conference.
Hey.
It's a
Thanksgiving game, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is
you
Thanksgiving.
Never can tell on Thanksgiving.
It is Thanksgiving. So, and then Wareham has a game this Friday at Voke, and then they finish against Bourne on Thanksgiving. So, it's not an easy road for the Vikings to finish up, especially, against a Bourne team that's kind of been hot, then cold, then hot, then cold. Mm-hmm. But I know they're pretty determined, and I know, they do have a lot that they're playing for, too, with Darian Fernandez closing in on that single season and career touchdown, both records. So I think he's 5 away from the single season touchdown record and 4 away from the career.
Well, I saw him the other night, and, I haven't seen him as a basketball player in a while.
Yeah.
I didn't get to cover any of the games last year. So I remember being kind of a skinnier kid back then, and when I saw him the other night, he looks like a football player now.
Yeah, he really does. I mean, he's bulked up, and I think somebody said he's thick. He's kind of he's thick. Which I guess we'll see how that translates onto the basketball court, because before we know it, a few more weeks and it'll be basketball season.
Let me tell you, it translated pretty well in this game. He was playing against the Harlem Wizards, a trick team, and he looked pretty good going to the hoop. And then, of course, he also wasn't afraid to put up a few trick shots of his own. He took a half-court shot that I thought was going to go in. It actually rimmed out. So it was pretty good. It was like, went about halfway down and then popped back out. And I was really hoping he would hit it. And I was trying to get him to do his ESPN top plays shot, but I don't think he was ready to try that again. But
Maybe during the basketball season, right?
I got to get you a copy of the video of that game just so you can see Kevin Berjoli get into a shoving match with one of the Harlem Wizards players. It's great stuff.
That's gonna be great video to watch there.
Absolutely. All right, well, why don't we get started with this week's First and 10?
Okay, First and 10. Number 10, Seth Moniz gave Old Colony a boost when he rejoined his teammates before Saturday's game. The sophomore suffered a broken femur and dislocated kneecap 2 weeks ago against Southeastern and watched last week's game from a wheelchair. Number 9, Fairhaven's Kobe Edwards returned the opening kickoff 84 yards for a touchdown 15 seconds into the game for one of the Blue Devils' 2 touchdowns in a win over Voc Tech. Number 8, in his first varsity action, freshman quarterback Andrew Raposa threw a touchdown pass to Kevin Nunes. In the second half, Raposa completed 4 of 11 passes for 109 yards and the touchdown. Number 7, Charlie McKeeman had another strong outing for Bishop Stang with 170 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Number 6, Colin Napton not only had 90 yards on 15 carries, he had the first 2-touchdown game of his varsity career for Old Rochester. Number 5, with a 35-12 win over Randolph, Old Rochester captured its 5th win of the season, marking the first time ORR has won 5 games in a season since 2008. Number 4, Weston Cohen stretched his streak to 5 straight games in which he scored a touchdown with his TD run against Case. His 8 touchdowns lead the team in scoring over that stretch. Number 3, in addition to leading the team's offense with 145 yards on 20 carries, Fairhaven's Billy Pyers made a goal line interception, scored a 30-yard touchdown, had a one-handed interception, and made a touchdown-saving tackle on Corey Pont to secure a win over GMB Voc-Tech. Number 2, with a 54-yard scoring strike to Kevin Blaze, Old Colony quarterback Jake Pringle tied Mike Cassidy for the school's single-season record for touchdown passes with 9. Cassidy has held the record by himself since 1985. Number 1, with a 21-8 victory over Wareham, Dighton Rehoboth is now in the driver's seat of the South Coast Conference as the only team with an undefeated conference record with 2 games remaining. If the Falcons win out, they'll clinch the title outright. They already have an edge over Wareham for the playoff berth if they both finish with 1 conference loss. So exciting stuff. And usually, Dighton Rehoboth isn't a team that's a team that we cover, and to make the top 10 is usually pretty big for us. And I had to put them as number 1 because that's all we've been talking about all season was Dighton Rehoboth Wareham.
When we thought we might not be talking about Dighton Rehoboth this year, we thought
they
we knew
graduated.
They'd be in the mix, but we didn't know they'd be as strong as they've been. Yeah,
they graduated a ton of kids. They have a sophomore quarterback in there that's getting the job done. They have a young team, young secondary. Which if you start to think about it, it's scary for next year and the following year if they got a lot of sophomores. So they're going to be a contender in the conference for the next few years, that's for sure.
Well, we do have a team this year that's still a contender in the conference, in their conference, because they haven't played any games in their conference yet.
Yeah.
And that would be New Bedford. They're playing Brockton. They'll be at Brockton Saturday at 1 o'clock, and now's the time that we see what some of these early season games have done for the Whalers.
Yeah, I know that the Whalers have opened the season. They had a tough schedule. They always schedule tough teams to get ready for the Big 3 because really, their season, and their playoff hopes come down to, facing Brockton and facing Durfee. In the last 2 years, they've been on, the positive end. They've made the playoffs, last year and the year before. They didn't beat Brockton last year, but Brockton didn't have a winning record. That's why New Bedford went to the playoffs last year. And the year before that, they did beat Brockton, which was, a big deal for the Whalers. But following a bye week, New Bedford dropped an 18-6 loss to Dennis Yarmouth in a game where the Whalers lost starting quarterback Mike Raposa to a concussion. As I said earlier in the first and 10, his younger brother, Andrew, a freshman, came in and had a solid showing in his first varsity action. He threw a touchdown pass. He also completed, I think I said 4 or 5 passes for 100 yards. So it gave the Whalers a spark, but I know, New Bedford is hoping that they have Mike Raposa back. He is closing in on the school's record for single season touchdown passes. He's 4 shy of touching Johnny Seed's record of 17. And really, it's possible for him to get that with 2 games remaining, especially if he can come in and play against Brockton. And Brockton already, is kind of in the driver's seat of the Big 3. They played Durfee on October 19th, and they won 50-0. So, it was a dominant performance by the Boxers. If, Brockton wins this game, the Boxers are the Big 3 champs. They're going to the playoffs. If New Bedford is able to pull out a win up at Brockton, then, Thanksgiving means, win over Durfee would clinch a playoff berth for New Bedford. So, the season comes down to this Saturday for New Bedford. Brockton has won its last 3 games in dominant fashion, outscoring the competition 105-12. The Boxers are averaging 23 points per game with wins over the likes of BC High, Xaverian, Leominster, and Catholic Memorial. Austin Roberts has scored 5 touchdowns over the past 3 games, and Aaron Leclerc has reached the end zone 4 times over that same span. A win over New Bedford, like I said earlier, would clinch the Big 3 and clinch a playoff berth. So, this is a big game. If you don't have anything to do on Saturday or you want to see, 2 teams kind of battling it out. Because, I know even though New Bedford's had, some ups and downs this year, I know, there's no doubt in my mind that the Whalers is going to come to this game and they're going to put everything they have on that field because, if they lose, they still have bragging rights, against Durfee on Thanksgiving, but I'm sure they'd be much much happier to be playing, Thanksgiving with, kind of the big three in the back of their minds with the conference title on the line. So
that should be an exciting game. New Bedford at Brockton, 1 o'clock, and it's not that far of a drive from the South Coast. It's about 35 minutes.
Not. And whenever I think about like New Bedford, because everyone always says Brockton, especially in football. It's been so long. New Bedford won 2 years ago, but they hadn't won 10 years prior to that. And I always think back to KG screaming, anything is possible. Mm-hmm. Whenever I think of like New Bedford going up there and just beating Brockton, because it's true. Anything is possible, and that's just the attitude the kids have to have, when they get on that bus Saturday morning.
And I bet that is the attitude they'll have.
Yep.
All right. Well, again, that is New Bedford at Brockton, 1 o'clock on Saturday. The next game we'll talk about is 7 o'clock on Friday night. It's Apponequet at Dighton Rehoboth. And Laurie should be able to tell us a little bit about Dighton Rehoboth because she's seen them, firsthand. And we actually have a photo that was tweeted to us by it was crab meat, and I didn't remember the numbers that was on it, but I'll bring up that photo.
Yeah, this was actually before the game, Dighton Rehoboth at Wareham on Friday night last week. Both Buddy Thomas and myself, we were both at the game. We were comparing notes before the game. Actually, I was trying to offer Buddy the numbers and the names for Dighton Rehoboth's players because there was no roster, and I had gotten some of the numbers written down from an assistant coach, and Buddy said, "I'm not going to worry about it. I'll figure it out." So that's what we were doing before the game.
And thank God I was able to find one on the internet.
Yeah. I had a roster from Dighton Rehoboth because I covered them week 2 against Fairhaven, and I don't know what I did with it.
Coaches, please have the trainer do it. The trainer is packing up all kinds of stuff already on their way to the game. Just have them do one more thing. Throw them in the bag.
Yeah, if I had a roster that day at the game, I could have probably sold them for like $10 easily to all the reporters that were there.
And then you could have donated that money to the schools.
Yeah, I could have.
Or used it to buy hot chocolate.
We'll get into the hot chocolate talk in a little while because I got some good stuff. All right. Well, this is a huge game, which, I know Apponequet is out of the conference race, with the loss a couple weeks ago to Fairhaven. They have 2 conference losses. There's no way they're going to compete for the title. But the Lakers could put a wrinkle, in the whole plan for DR, because, like I said earlier, if Apponequet knocks off Dighton Rehoboth, then, and Wareham wins out, the DR would share the conference title with Wareham, which I know DR would still go to the playoffs, which is a big deal. But, I know it's always, teams always want to win the conference title outright. They want to say that they're the conference champs, not the co-champs. So I know, Dighton Rehoboth is going to come to play, but Apponequet, I think they like kind of that role. If you're not going to be competing for the title, why not, kind of, have an impact on another team's chances. And I'm sure Wareham fans and players are going to be keeping an eye on that game, and as soon as their game ends, they're going to want to know, if Apponequet knocked them off, because they don't really control their own destiny right now. But Apponequet rebounded from that loss to Fairhaven 2 weeks ago with a huge win last week over Case, 28-0. In that game, the Lakers scored on 4 straight possessions to jump out to a huge lead and just coast the rest of the way. Weston Cohen scored 1 touchdown. Matt Michael scored 2 touchdowns, and senior Jeff Lopes scored his first varsity touchdown of his career. It was on a 1-yard run. And like I said, Apponequet definitely is going to be determined to give DR that first conference loss. And the Falcons, they've gotten the job done. They opened the season with a loss to Somerset Berkeley, and since then they've won 7 straight. They're 6-0 in the South Coast Conference. The key recently has been the play of sophomore quarterback Nate Kowalski. He's thrown multiple touchdown passes for the 3rd time in 4 outings, and that was last week against Wareham. They're on the inside track, to the title and to the playoff berth. They really control their own destiny. If they win out, then there's no question they're, outright conference champs, and they're going to the playoffs. Kowalski connected with Paul Costa last week for a 32-yard scoring strike, and then hit Kyle Rose for 57 yards for another touchdown. And that gave DR a 14-0 lead at halftime. Kowalski has now thrown 9 scoring strikes in his past 5 games. So this is, only a sophomore. He's getting the job done through the air, and he's really, helped Dighton Rehoboth, traditionally a running team, become a lot more balanced, and I think other teams have had trouble. I know, Wareham last week had 2 blown coverages on those touchdown passes, and that's really what hurt them in that game. So I think teams are a little bit, having trouble trying to stop DR's passing attack, especially because they still get the job done on the ground too. They still were picking up 3 yards, 5 yards, 6 yards. They kept moving the ball on the ground, and then they go to the air and come up with a big play.
And even if the Lakers aren't in the title hunt this year, as they have been in years past, they still have a healthy competitiveness with Dighton Rehoboth.
Oh, yeah.
They've got a lot of scores to settle with the Falcons.
Oh, yeah. And just, I know this game is at Dighton Rehoboth on Friday, but I just want to bring up an update on the whole hot chocolate situation at Apponequet. I was there Sunday night for a girls' soccer game, and I was told that the hot chocolate had improved at the concession stand. So I went down.
Someone actually went up to you and told you this.
Yes. Someone told me that there was a whole bunch of kids that had the hot chocolate and said it was good. So I went down at halftime to get a hot chocolate, and it was sold out at the concession stand.
So it must be good.
I guess so. I don't know. So then I asked the person at the concession stand, well, what do you have that's hot? And they said, we have coffee. So I said, okay, I'll try the coffee. Wasn't hot. Did not taste good. I think we're starting another try. I mean, now that they've improved the hot chocolate, coffee, we got to get that up to the next level. So
all I care about is that the hot dogs are good. Actually, I don't really like hot dogs.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan. Hot chocolate.
I like it when you go to a game and they have burgers.
And I know this is a good transition to the next game we're going to talk about, Wareham. But when I was at the Wareham-Dighton Rehoboth game on Friday night, I tried the hot chocolate. It was very good. It was hot. It had a good taste to it. And someone actually came up to me when Buddy and I were walking out to the parking lot and asked if I had tried it and how it rated. So
wow.
Yeah.
For my money, I haven't tried food at a lot of places, but for my money, I really do enjoy the food at Old Rochester.
I don't think I've had anything at Old Rochester to eat.
It's good stuff.
And I haven't covered a game there, so I can't tell you how the hot chocolate is.
You have to cover one by the end of the season so you can try it. There's only 2 games left.
Yeah, they're on the road this week. I don't know about Thanksgiving. We'll have to see.
It's all right. We'll have them bring in some of the stuff from the Bulldog Cafe for you to try it. That's what we're going to do for the Thanksgiving preview. We're just going to have all the concessionaires bring in samples of your hot chocolate, and we'll have Laurie.
How about if you blindfold me and I can try each one and try and guess where it's from?
We might try that. That's a good idea. All right. Well, that is Apponequet at Dighton Rehoboth, 7 p.m. on Friday. As you mentioned, our next game is Wareham at Greater New Bedford Voc Tech. That's also 7 o'clock on Friday. The Vikings looking to rebound here, and Voc Tech hoping to kind of stand in their way of that.
Yep. Wareham is coming off that disappointing loss to Dighton Rehoboth that pretty much ended, their chances at a playoff berth. I mean, they still have hopes at finishing as co-champs in the conference. Really, that game, Wareham had trouble, rushing the ball. They had trouble throwing the ball. I mean, the offense, which had, been averaging, I think, close to 30 points per game during, their first 8 games of the season, just struggled. Darian Fernandez, the area's leading rusher, just had 55 yards on 14 carries. He was also held out of the end zone for the second time this season. He did score the 2-point conversion, and he has scored every game this season, including another 2-point conversion. But it was just a tough game all around for Wareham's offense. Never really got on track. I know they did have a solid drive in the third quarter. Charles Tranfaglia, he did score from 5 yards out. That was his first touchdown carry of the season. But really after that, DR took over, had a nice long drive, and then Wareham couldn't really get much going after that. So, it was definitely a disappointing for Wareham and its fans. But, the Vikings have a lot to look forward to. If they win out and, if DR does get one loss, they could finish as co-champs. And also, as I said earlier, Darian Fernandez does have 2 records that are very close, within his grasp. One is the, career touchdown record, which he's 4 shy of, so he could get that very easily. And then he's 5 shy of the single-season touchdown record from Wareham. So those are 2 things that, I know are going to be in the back of his mind. And Wareham faces a Voc Tech team that's kind of been on a skid recently. The Bears were held out of the end zone last week for the second time this season, despite driving inside the Fairhaven 10-yard line twice. Both times the Blue Devils came up with huge stops. And the Bears also gave off a kickoff return for a score. Vogue-Tech, which opened the season 4-2, has lost its last 3 games by a combined 60-14. And the Bears haven't scored an offensive touchdown since the second quarter against Apponequet 3 weeks ago. So Vogue-Tech, really, the offense needs to get back on track. Been struggling as of late. But it's going to be tough against a Wareham team that I know is going to come out determined. Especially, let's bounce back from that loss and let's, end the season strong. So I expect I expect Wareham to be able to put some points on the board, even though Vogue-Tech's defense has been solid all year. So.
And luckily for them, and for Darien trying to get that record, it's at Vogue-Tech. So even with all this wet weather,
the turf
nice
is going to be, it's.
Should be a nice fast track for them.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's Wareham at Greater New Bedford Vogue-Tech, 7 p.m. on Friday. Our next game is also 7 p.m. on Friday, Fairhaven at Case. And that's another couple of teams that, they're not in the mix, but it's not going to mean that it's not going to be any less competitive, that's for sure.
Case has struggled this year. The Cardinals have just the 1 win. They're winless in the conference.
But that's not really indicative of how these games go.
Yeah, I'd be surprised, though, if this game was close. I really think Fairhaven, I think they've won, what do I have here? They've won 4 straight since opening the season, 2-2. They're just going to come out and show everybody, even though they're not in the title race, they should have been. That first game of the season that got postponed or got canceled, and then them having to open against DR, not really being prepared. I know that's really kind of hung over Fairhaven's heads all season. And last week, Billy Pyers, he's, one of their, I think, 13 seniors. He just came out and dominated. He did just about everything against Vogue-Tech. He led the team on offense, 145 rushing yards, had a touchdown, also had 2 interceptions, and a tackle-saving he had a tackle-saving touchdown, or a touchdown-saving tackle. Sorry, I'm a little tired. But Fairhaven's defense, got the job done, stopping Vogue-Tech's offense twice within the 10-yard line. And, the offense got, they only had the 1 touchdown run by Billy Pyers, and then they had the big kickoff return for a score by Kobe Edwards, and they just held on for the victory. Sometimes you're not going to score a lot of points, but, 4 straight wins for Fairhaven. And, Case really just hasn't gotten anything going all season. Last week they couldn't contain Apponequet's rushing attack. They gave up 4 rushing touchdowns. It was the second time this year the Cardinals were kept out of the end zone. They were shut out 28-0. Case has managed to score just 8 touchdowns this season while giving up an average of 24.7 points per game. So, all signs kind of point to a big Fairhaven win Friday night at Case. I have them at Case. Buddy said it was at Fairhaven. We just got a lot of wind coming around here.
I think that the building's going to fall over.
But it should, if you're a Fairhaven fan, make the ride to Case, because I think it's at Case. I don't know if it's at Fairhaven, but we'll have it in the paper. But it'll be worth the trip.
All right. Again, Fairhaven at Case, 7 p.m. on Friday. Our next game is Old Rochester at Seekonk, another 7 p.m. Friday game. And like you said, the Bulldogs got that elusive 5th win last week, and now it's all about, Henry Quinlan told me after the game, it's all about building this program and showing what they're capable of.
Yeah, and I know that win kind of seemed, they were on a little bit of a losing streak, and that win, it just seemed like they couldn't get that 5th win. I know they've been stuck on 4 wins for a while now, the last few seasons, but they finally got it last week, with a non-league victory over Randolph 35-12. It ended a 3-game losing streak for the Bulldogs, and it wasn't easy. Old Rochester overcame 4 fumbles and several penalties, in that game to come out with the victory. Nolan Bergeron had 16 carries, 92 yards, and a touchdown. He also threw a touchdown pass. Richie Phillips had 13 carries, 72 yards, and a touchdown. And as I said earlier, Colin Napton, had his first 2-touchdown game of his varsity career. He also had 90 rushing yards. And Hayden Bergeron caught a 16-yard touchdown pass from Nolan. So, a lot of guys got into the mix for them scoring the 35 points. It was great to get back on the winning track. And, they're making the trip to Seekonk to face a Warrior team that is coming off a bye. Seekonk opened the season 1-7 before last week's bye. The Warriors' lone win came 3 weeks ago against Case, 33-2. And their 7 losses, Warriors have been outscored a combined 188-45. So they're giving up a lot of points, and they're not really putting that many points on the board. They've only had multiple touchdown games twice this season. Mike Ludi has scored 4 touchdowns this season, while Nick Weiser has had 3 scores. The Warriors have found the end zone just 11 times all season. So this is a team that's struggling to get the ball, in the end zone, and also, having trouble stopping the opposition. So I see a 6th win coming this week for Old Rochester.
All right. Again, ORR at Seekonk, 7 p.m. Friday. Also, 7 p.m. on Friday, Bishop staying at Bourne. And that's going to be a very tough game but like you said at the beginning of the show, the Canalmen have kind of been back and forth.
Yeah, it's really hard to put it, to pinpoint, if Bourne, is a good team or not so good. They've had great times where they, had great games, and then they've had other times where they come out and they've kind of been a little disappointing. I know they graduate a lot of kids, but, they were strong in a loss to DR, and then, they came out and then they beat Old Rochester. I think it was in overtime or in the last second. So, they've had spurts where they looked really good, the Canalmen, and then they've had games where they haven't looked so good. I know staying, even though they're coming off a loss at Martha's Vineyard, the Spartans are playing their best football of the season right now. They followed up their first win of the season with a strong showing at Martha's Vineyard last week. The Spartans were unsuccessful on 2 two-point conversion attempts, and they had a point after touchdown blocked. That's 5 points right there. They ended up losing to the Vineyarders by 4 points, pretty much right there. That's the game. They are still making some mistakes, but to go to the Vineyard and to be a team that, is 1-7 at the time, and to go to the Vineyard and only lose by 4 points, that's you got to take a little bit of a moral victory away with that. And like I said, in the 1st and 10, Charlie McKeeman continues to get the job done. 170 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Mike Pratt also found the end zone for Bishop staying in that loss. So the Spartans are playing a lot better right now. And Bourne has lost 4 of its last 5 games. Last week they lost to Rockland, the Canalmen, 41-8. But 2 of their 4 losses the last few weeks have been by 3 points or less. So they're kind of coming out on that short end, of some of these tight games. But last week against Rockland, the Canalmen lone touchdown came on a 25-yard pass from Zach Songer to Tommy Davis. Songer has thrown 3 touchdown passes in the past 5 games. Chad Marsh leads Bourne in scoring this season with 17 touchdowns. So he's really been the guy, week in and week out that's gotten the job done for them. And the Canalmen played last week without running back Marquise Rhodes, who was injured the week earlier against Old Rochester. I'm not sure if he's going to be back for this game or not, but I know having him out there is a big deal, for Bourne, especially against the Stang team that's playing better. So
And these are all, some very interesting names that I'm sure the Bourne PA announcer is going to have a lot of fun with. So, Spartan fans, if you've never heard this guy, you're in for a treat. That is Bishop staying at Bourne, 7 p.m. on Friday. Who's covering that game?
I'm not sure. I don't know if the Cape is covering it for us or.
Because we need some. We'll need some footage. We'll need some somebody to tweet us some footage of the announcer doing his thing. It's one thing when you do it at the beginning of the game, but he does it every play.
Really?
Yeah, so it almost gets annoying. All right, our next game that we're going to talk about is Dartmouth at Durfee, also Friday night at 7 o'clock. And this should be the chance for the Indians to get in the win column, I would think.
It's been a while since Indian fans have been able to celebrate a victory this year. They opened the season with a win over Bishop Stang, and then they've lost 7 straight since then. I know they've faced some tough competition. But Dartmouth is coming off a bye week. Much needed, and that was following the team's 27-7 loss to Bridgewater Raynham that eliminated the Indians from the OCL title chase. A week later, Barnstable beat Bridgewater Raynham to clinch the OCL title and a conference berth, or a playoff berth. The Indians are just hoping to get back on track after that 7-game losing streak, and this is the week to do it. They're facing winless Durfee. The Hilltoppers are 0-8 overall and 0-1 in the Big Three. They've lost all 8 of their games this year by a combined 319-76. 319, that's a lot of points to be giving up. The Hilltoppers have only scored multiple touchdowns in a game 3 times this year while giving up 34 or more points in all 8 games, including 50 or more points twice. So I know I said earlier that they lost to Brockton by 50, and then they lost somebody else, I think it was by 50 or 55 earlier this season. Raheem Barsney, he scored one of Durfee's 2 touchdowns last week in a loss to Bishop Fan. And I know I saw Durfee, I want to say it was maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, against Apponequet. And this kid's impressive. I mean, when he gets in the open field, it's hard to track him down. He's kind of a big play kid, so really Dartmouth's defense is going to have to focus in on stopping him. I know we're looking at Durfee and saying a winless program. They do have some athletes there. They just can't put it all together. They do have size, at least against Apponequet. They look big. They looked really big. But the Lakers did win that game, and they just didn't. They made mistakes. And that's what cost them. I think they had a couple turnovers and some penalties, and had some defensive lapses, and Apponequet took advantage a few weeks ago. But I see Dartmouth, finally getting on track, and as Buddy had in his column, I think it was in today's paper, if Dartmouth wins, against Durfee, that kind of gives them some hope, maybe upsetting Fairhaven on Thanksgiving and in the season with a 2-game winning streak. I think that would put a smile on some of the Dartmouth players' faces.
Sure.
Especially, it's been a long season for Dartmouth fans, so.
Well, that's Dartmouth at Durfee, 7 p.m. on Friday, and our final game will be Old Colony at Nantucket. That's 5 o'clock on Saturday, and that's. I think I know who will be at that game, but whether or not he's covering it for us, yeah.
Bill will definitely be at that game. We're just saying that because he covers the game for the Nantucket for the radio. I know we let off the cast, the webcast with New Bedford's game, which is the game of the week. But I gotta say, we're gonna save one of the best for the last. Going over this Old Colony game at Nantucket. It's 5 o'clock on Saturday, and if you want to see a record fall, go make the trip to Nantucket, because I have a feeling that there's going to be a new touchdown record for quarterback Jake Pringle. I know he tied the school record last week with his 9th touchdown pass of the season, and I see this kid finding the end zone at least once, maybe more than that, this week at Nantucket. I know everyone, whenever you travel to Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard, it's always tough because you got to take the ferry ride over. But Nantucket, they do have just 3 wins this season, and they've lost 3 straight games. But all 3 of those losses were by 6 points or less. But Old Colony's defense needs to focus in on Brian DePass, who has been hot recently. He has had a hand in 8 of Nantucket's last 10 touchdowns. The last 3 weeks, he's rushed for 6 and passed for 2 more. But like I said earlier, junior quarterback Jake Pringle, for Old Colony fans, he's going to be the storyline. He's been a bright spot in a season that, has been kind of a tough season for the Krugers. They entered this game 2-5, 0-4 in the Mayflower. Last week he had that touchdown pass to Kevin Blaze. And, they didn't have too many other things go right in that game. But I think, when you have a teammate that is, going for a record and, has something like that to play for, I think it lifts everyone up around them. And last week, Pringle, he completed 11 of 23 passes for 180 yards, but he threw 2 interceptions, which cost the Krugers in the loss to South Shore. It could be an exciting game for Old Colony, win or lose. I know, sometimes it's tough when an individual, is, close to a record or gets the record. I know last year I covered Apponequet at Wareham, and Nate Michael broke the school record for touchdowns. I think it was career touchdowns. I'm not sure if it was single season. It's hard to remember. He has both records, but he broke one of them, and they lost. Mm-hmm. I remember Apponequet lost in that game, and, he was disappointed.
And then you want to ask him about the record, and he doesn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, so I know it's always tough when you're doing well and your team isn't doing well. But, I know it's something to be proud of, because this record has been around for a long time. I think it's since 85. So, take some pride in that. And also, your teammates take pride in that, too, because you got to have people to throw to. You also have to have an offensive line that gives you the time to pass. So, your quarterback's only as good as his line and as his receivers. So.
All right, we'll do a final quick rundown of the games Friday night. All 7 o'clock games. Old Rochester at Seekonk, Bishop Stang at Bourne, Dartmouth at Durfee, Wareham at Greater New Bedford Voc Tech, Apponequet at Dighton Rehoboth, and Fairhaven at Case. And then on Saturday, we have a 1 o'clock game, the game of the week, New Bedford at Brockton, and Old Colony at Nantucket at 5 p.m. So if you go to any of these games, remember to tweet us, SC_varsity on Twitter. You can also like us on Facebook, southcoastvarsity.com on Facebook, and you can always email us sports@s-t.com as well.
Yep.
So we look forward to seeing whatever you send in, and now that we know how to integrate it with the show, please send us more video, more photos, and anything else. We had some interesting comments going on Twitter Friday night, but we can't say any of them on the air. So if you want to send us some tweets that are family friendly,
keep it clean, guys, when you send tweets, because
Yeah, we'd like to be able to use them as part of the show. Yep. All right, so that does it for this week. We'll be back next week. So
actually, will we be back?
Are we going to do a show in between, or are we going to wait for the preview?
I think next week we'll try and do just the show for Old Colony, because they're the only team that plays.
Okay.
And then the following week we'll drag Buddy Thomas in here and hopefully and get a Thanksgiving preview. Because we're only 2 weeks from Thanksgiving.
2 weeks away from having 2 Thanksgiving dinners, because I go to my own parents and my mother-in-law's house.
That's not right.
Hey, it's a holiday. All right, so that does it. So until next time, we will see you under the lights.
And in the end zone.